Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. We are surrounded by books. It's not a book haul, but it is a book recommendation video. It's been maybe like a month or something since I did the last one, so we're gonna do another one. 4 books as per usual. Have them next to me. So I have all 4 of my books here. We're doing the theme of romantasy. This time around, romantasy is just romance and fantasy together. And if you're questioning why, is because sometimes there's fantasy books, but romance isn't like a key plot in them. The romance is kind of like important. So we have romantasy, and honestly I don't think I've done a romantasy book recommendation on my channel. Maybe I have, but I don't really remember doing so, and if I don't remember doing so, it's probably been a while. So here we are. I would like to say they're all kind of different vibes. 2 of them are by the same author, but they're not. They're their own series, so they're separate, but I really enjoyed them. But we are going to start with Kingdom of the Wicked by Kerri Maniscalco. Definitely butchered her last name, but this is the start in a trilogy, which I've read the entire trilogy. It's really good. And then there's also a spin-off series that has started with another one of the characters in this book, which I do have the start of that one as well. And I believe book 2 is coming out soon, but we love it. It's good. As usual, gonna read the back, give y'all a little insight on my thought of the book, and go from there. 2 sisters, 1 brutal murder, a quest for vengeance that will unleash hell itself, and an intricating romance. Amelia and her twin sister Victoria are stray witches who live secretly among humans, avoiding notice and persecution. One night, Victoria misses dinner service at the family's renowned restaurant in Sicily. Amelia soon finds the body of her beloved twin, desecrated beyond belief. Devastated, Amelia set out to find her sister's killer and to seek vengeance at any cost, even if it means using dark magic that's been long forbidden. Then Amelia meets Wrath, one of the wicked, who are princes of hell. She has been warned against in tales since she was a child. Wrath claims to be on Amelia's side, tasked by his master with solving a series of women's murders on the island. But when it comes to the wicked, nothing is as it seems. So this is kind of like witches and demons and otherworldly beasts. That's kind of the fantasy characters that are in this book. Obviously our female main character is Amelia, and our male main character is Wrath. That's what's happening here. So Amelia and her sister are witches. I mean, honestly, the whole family is, but they have certain rules and certain things that they know and certain things that they don't based on what their family has told them, so they don't know the complete truth, I will say. And then when Amelia finds her sister murdered, it kind of sets her on this path of going into the dark side, which is how she meets Wrath. And her main goal is to find her sister. Find the murderer who did this to her sister. And in doing so, she summons Wrath, which she thinks she kind of just summoned like a demon or so to help do her bidding. This is where, the dark magic comes in. And they have somewhat of a complicated relationship at the start, because he wants to know certain things from her, and she wants to know certain things from him, but it kind of falls on like a bargaining relationship at the start, because one, she summons him, so she is essentially like his master in a sense, but there's certain things he's willing to say for free and certain things that are going to come with a cost. That is our bargaining. And as they're on this journey of trying to find out the killer, they discover this also has a magical aspect that comes into it. Witches are an important part, as well as magical creatures happening. I'm trying not to say too much because, again, this is a trilogy and we're only at book 1. But I will say Amelia learns more about herself that she never knew when she goes down this path with Wrath. And then you also learn more about Wrath because there's more to him than meets the eye. And there's a lot going on with him and his past and all that jazz, and how he has a connection to Amelia. So that's all I'm gonna say, because I don't want to say too much, because like I said, there's 3 books and I'm trying to remember all that's in the first book, and I think I did a good job of not spoiling too much. But I really enjoyed this series, and especially when it came to like the 3rd book, I think it was like the perfect conclusion for Amelia and Wrath's story, and it like sets it up for the next series that I told you. There's a person in this book that gets her own series. It sets it up nicely for that. And usually when I recommend the first book in the series, I'm always recommending the entire series. So this is definitely recommending the entire series and also the spin-off series. So there we have it, Kingdom of the Wicked. Now we're gonna move on. This is Bride by Ali Hazelwood. This is actually the first book I have read by her. She's written other romances. This was her first like dive into romantasy. And I had heard mixed feelings about her other book, so I wasn't sure about this one. But then my friend Hannah bought this one, and it kind of piqued my interest to buy this book, and I did, and I don't regret it because this one was really good. I think this was a good introduction to Ali Hazelwood. Although I know the rest of her books are romantasy, she did say that this book is going to get a sequel, but it's not necessarily following the same couple that focuses on in this book. It follows a different couple that's introduced in this book. So it's one of those interconnected series where you kind of don't have to read them in order, but it just makes sense to read them in order. So there you have it, Bride. And as you can kind of tell by the cover, this is a romantasy with werewolves and vampires. A vampire bride and an alpha werewolf form a dangerous alliance in this enthralling new paranormal romance. Misery Lark, daughter of a powerful vampire councilman, is an outcast. Her days of living anonymously among the humans are over. She has been called upon to uphold an alliance between the vampires and their mortal enemies, the Wares. Wares are ruthless and unpredictable, and their alpha, Lo Moreland, is no exception. He rules his pact with absolute authority, but not without justice or feeling. It's clear from the way he tracks Misery's every movement that he doesn't trust her. If only he knew how right he was. Misery has her own reasons to agree to this marriage of convenience, reasons that have nothing to do with politics or alliances, and everything to do with the one thing she's cared about. And she's willing to do whatever it takes to get back what's hers. I actually just, I really, really loved this book. It was so good. Okay, so not only is it like a marriage of convenience, it's also like enemies to lovers, for the simple fact that it's a werewolf and a vampire, and they're sworn enemies. So, that doesn't happen. But there's this kind of basically the marriage of convenience / pact going on, where if the two can marry, the Misery and Lo get married, it's gonna kind of give a good alliance for the vampires and the werewolves. But while Misery isn't like opposed to this marriage, she's also doing it for her own reasons, which are very good reasons. I don't want to say like too much of why she's doing it. You do find out early on why Misery is, willing to go into the marriage, but she has her own reasons, and she didn't really tell anyone because she doesn't know, in a sense, of who she can trust. And what she's finding out is that her answers are going to be among the Wares. So for her to get into the Wares, she has to marry Lo, and by doing that, she gets moved into like their their lands, and she essentially lives with Lo, but they have a whole different werewolf housing setup system. But basically, by marrying Lo, she gets the end to the Werelands. Now, she is also a bit of an outcast among the vampires, because they have this thing with vampires where a young child gets picked and they have to go live outside in the human world. You learn more about that in the book, but Misery was that child that was chosen to live in the human world. So she is looked at as an outcast to the vampires because she lived in the human world for like her whole life. And she's also looked at as an outcast among the werewolves because she's a vampire. So she kind of has this, she doesn't really know where to fit in, but she does have this one person in her life that understands her. But there's a whole situation there. Meanwhile, Lo is basically just trying to do what's best for his pack. Like, he's trying to take care of his people, and if marrying Misery is what needs to be done, he's willing to do it. But at the same time, he's trying to keep Misery at arm's length because he's going kind of through his own problems, self problems, and then problems with his pack. And so they're like fighting the tension between the two of them. So this book does have the tension built because enemies to lovers, but then they kind of get to a point where they understand each other better in a sense, and then that's kind of where their chemistry starts to build, and you learn more things of why Misery did what she did for the marriage of convenience. So there we have it. Bride, so good. And I am excited for the second book to learn about the other couple. I don't want to say who it is now and spoil it. You do have to read to find out who's going to be our second couple, but I'm looking forward to that one. I think it's going to be good. And as mentioned, the last two books are by the same author. I'm going to start with Rhapsodic by Laura Thalassa. Probably said her last name wrong, but this is good stuff right here. So the reason I had started reading this, which I had book one a while ago and told myself I was going to read it, Then my friend Hannah, again, she said she had started reading this book and it was really good. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna lock it. I'm gonna read it because Hannah and I, we like the same type of books. So usually if she says something is good, it is good. So I think she was like 100 pages in and said it was good. So I started reading it. I think that like same day or that next day I finished it. So good. Which at this point I had read 2 other books by Laura in a separate series, which I have. And I'm recommending book 1. So I was kind of interested to see what this one would be about. I will say, even though I'm recommending 2 books by her from 2 different series, this one is my favorite from Laura. Like, she put something in this book specifically. It's so good. The series itself is really good, but book 1 was just crazy good. So there we have it. Calypso Lilith is a siren with a very big problem, one that stretches up her arm and far into her past. For the past 7 years, Callie has been wearing a bracelet of black beads up her wrist, magical IOUs for favors she once received. Only death or repayment will fulfill her obligations. Everyone knows if you need a favor, you go to the bargainer to make it happen. He's a man who can get you into anything you want at a price, and everyone knows that sooner or later he always collects. But for Callie, he's never asked for repayment, not until now. When Callie finds the bargainer in her room, a grin on his lips and a twinkle in his eye, she knows things are about to change. At first, it's admitting a truth, a single bead's worth, acknowledging the attraction between them. But the bargainer is after more than just rekindling their connection. Something is happening in the other world. Fae warriors are going missing one by one, and only the women are returned, each in a glass casket, a child clutched to her breast. For the bargainer to save his people, he'll need the help of the siren he sprung long ago, if she can forgive him. So, Fae are magical, I guess like elf-like creatures. They're basically humans with pointy ears and magical powers. That's fae used in this sense. And then obviously Callie is a siren. So in this romantasy, we have a whole lot of mythical creatures of sorts, just to lay out the land for you. So Callie meets the bargainer like when she was like 16 or 17. She called up to the bargainer to help her with a problem, and that's when everything kind of set in motion. And like he states this though, usually he doesn't help like teenagers, but Callie was in a dire situation, so he made an exception. And then from that moment on, Callie's always calling to the bargainer and he always comes to her. And they kind of have like a complicated relationship. So she starts racking up the black beads and they just go up her wrist. And one day the bargainer leaves her for 7 years. No reason, no nothing. They lose connection. Then out the blue, bam, he is in her home and they're kind of having like a face off, which Callie is upset because it's like, you up and left me for 7 years, no contact, no nothing. And now he's talking about like he needs her help type situation. So they kind of get off to a rocky start because the way their past ended, it just doesn't help things. But the bargainer has reasons on why he wants and needs Callie's help. And because Callie has the bracelet of black beads, magical IOUs, she basically has to help him. Like she doesn't really have a choice because she owes him for all the calls she made prior to them not talking for 7 years. So as they're basically on this journey together to figure out what's happening in the other world, what's happening to the Fae women, they start to rekindle the little flame that they had a while ago. But Callie is a little hesitant because she's still trying to figure out why he left her. And the bargainer has his reasons, valid reasons, I might say. And honestly, to me, I think the bargainer was just trying to play things like cool. He was trying to be cool, calm, and collected, like that guy. But like deep down, he really wants Callie. And so while they're trying to figure out what's going on between them and what's going on individually with them, they're also essentially trying to save the world. Now in this book, there is the real world and then the other world. So the other world is basically your magical realm of sorts, and there's other magical realms in the other world, but there is also the human world. So Callie was living in the human world because although she was a siren, she did look like a human, so that's where she was. And then the bargainer they would go between the human world and the other world. If that's making sense, I hope that's making sense. But again, this is a series, this is a trilogy. There are 3 books. Well, there's technically like a novella that you can read before the 3rd book. It's 3.5. It essentially focuses more on the bargainer, but you can read it and you cannot read. Like you don't have to read it for the series. I did and Hannah didn't. You're still gonna get the gist of things, but it's truly just a trilogy. All good, like good stuff. This is top tier, and there's so much that happens in the series, and when you just learn more about Callie and the bargainer, they have so much between them. So much. It's good stuff. It's good stuff. I'm telling you, my favorite book by Laura, and probably also like part of my favorite series by her. So we're actually going to move on to the last book. Again, it's by Laura. It's called Pestilence. You may or may not know, but that is the four horsemen: pestilence, famine, death, war. Book 1 is Pestilence. I've read book 1 and 2, but I have the entire series. I just haven't read 3 and 4 yet. This is a romantasy, and it's really a romantasy because obviously the four horsemen aren't real people, but like it takes place in the human world, but the four deadly horsemen make appearances. If this is making sense, I hope it's making sense. They have like their own time that they came from, but then they come into the human world when it's called for them to come. I hope that makes sense. They came to earth: pestilence, war, famine, death. Four horsemen riding their screaming steeds, racing to the corners of the world. Four horsemen with the power to destroy all of humanity. They came to earth, and they came to end us all. When Pestilence, the first of the horsemen, comes for Sarah Burns' town, one thing is certain: everyone she knows and she loves is marked for death. Unless, of course, the angelic-looking horseman is stopped, which is exactly what Sarah has in mind when she shoots the unholy beast off his steed. Too bad no one told her that Pestilence can't be killed. Alive and furious, the horseman takes Sarah prisoner, determined to make her suffer for impeding his mission. Despite her pleas, nothing and no one gets in the way of his orders to destroy humankind. Only the longer Pestilence spends beside Sarah's bravery and compassion, the more he seems to understand her and humanity. And the longer Sarah travels with Pestilence and his plague, the more uncertain she grows about his true feelings toward her and hers toward him. Sarah might still be able to save the world, but she'll have to sacrifice her heart in the process. So obviously, Sarah and Pestilence are our main characters. So the whole reason that Sarah ends up having this interaction with Pestilence is she basically tells the group of people, like, I'm gonna stay back, I'm gonna defend us from Pestilence, and like everyone else basically packed their bags and left, which it doesn't do much because Pestilence spreads. But Sarah's like, I'm gonna stay, I'm gonna defeat him, protect my people. So that's how Pestilence and Sarah have an interaction. And because Sarah essentially shoots him with an arrow off his steed, he kind of feels a little bit amused by her, like, why did this human think she could do this to me? So he takes her as prisoner so she can see all the destruction that he's gonna bring to all the neighboring towns and whatnot. And it's a little brutal because he rides on his horse and then like ties her up, and she's kind of walking behind, but sometimes he's running on the horse and she has to run type thing. So she's prisoner. She's kind of along for the ride with no choice. And I mean, she's begged, like, just, end it all, like, kill me, like, why are you doing this? And he's like, kind of to show you, like, you thought you could stop me, so now you're gonna witness all that I bring. And as Pestilence is spreading pestilence, Sarah starts to understand him a little bit better, and then Pestilence starts to understand Sarah a bit more, because through all this, Sarah is still, being brave about it. She's trying to get Pestilence to be compassionate to these people, like pleading to spare some of their lives and whatnot. So they're starting to learn more about each other. But at the same time, Pestilence is kind of like, I was raised to do this one thing, to come to Earth and, essentially end mankind. That's all that I know how to do. So we see growth in Pestilence and Sarah as well, because she gets a little bit more understanding. But it's a tricky situation, a little bit of up and down, because honestly, you have Pestilence to come in, but there's also supposed to be war, famine, and death. So even if things with Pestilence, stop, we still have the next horseman that's coming in. So it's like a circle of events. But it was some good stuff. It was definitely interesting because I never would have thought, the four horsemen and like a human. It's definitely kind of like a weird relationship, but it makes sense if you read the book. And like I said, I've read War as well, and that one was definitely interesting. All of the horsemen, from reading Pestilence and reading War, they have their own personalities in a way they did like grow up in the same way, but because they bring different things to humankind, they have different mindsets. So there we have it, Pestilence. It was really good. I enjoyed it. I am looking forward to reading the last 2 books in the series because I've heard Famine and Death are really good. So there we have it, Pestilence. And that is our last book to recommend this time around. I don't know which genre to do next, you know? Maybe comment if there's a particular one that you want. Your girl reads romance, romantasy, fantasy, and mystery thriller to a degree, because I don't do the gory stuff. I like a little suspense. So drop down what you want to see next, and yeah, I don't know what I'm gonna see y'all next or what's gonna be the next video, but I'll see y'all then. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you would like to see more, please hit the subscribe button down below. Peace and blessings, my loves.